Welcome back to Prep Session Economics. In the last session, we talked about budgets. Now we'll talk about taxation, taxes. Oh, that word, very common around us. I'll tell you about my last experience at Domino's. I realized that you can buy pizza cheaper using the website. So I logged on my phone to Domino's Pizza, and I was making my ordered for nice pizza. And when I got to the end, I was about to make my payments. Then I saw that word, VAT, value added tax. And I'm like, my pizza is this amount of money. Then why am I paying tax for buying pizza? Well, welcome to taxation. We will learn about taxes. We'll learn about the types of taxes, the methods of taxation, how it's being done, the principles of taxation. Don't worry, all these things are very simple. You get to understand it, and very soon you'll be able to either calculate your parents' taxes or even calculate the taxes that you pay whenever you go to the local store. Okay, so what is tax? What is tax? Now, tax is a compulsory amount of money that individuals or indigents or people must pay in a country, and it's paid on goods and services or on firms, or it's imposed on people actually. So taxes can be imposed on people, on companies, on goods and services. Services like what you're having right now, what I'm rendering to you, or a product like your computer or your phone, or individuals like your parents, or firms like Prep Station. So let's talk about the principles of the tax system. Now, the key word there is the principles of a good tax system. A tax is supposed to be good. It's supposed to be positive. So what are the principles of this good tax system? Well, there are some principles that we might need to follow. Number one is equity. Tax should be fair. Is it fair? We'll have that argument later. But for now, tax should be fair. Tax should be simple to understand. Maybe after this session, it should be simple to you, but tax normally should be simple to people to calculate, to understand. Tax also should be efficient. Government needs to employ people, employ experts, or even get a building or facilities that for them to collect taxes, because government need to have a website, they have to have an account, all the monies that are collected as taxes have to be paid into somewhere. It has to have security because it's people's money all over the country, so much billions or millions. And government needs to spend money on generating tax. Like, you want to collect tax and you have to spend money to even get the tax itself. But what we're talking about in terms of efficiency is the cost of getting those taxes should not be big, should not be substantial, should not be so large. Imagine I have to employ people, put up a building just to generate about 1 million as taxes or as income, and I have to spend about 800 to 500,000 to get all these things done. Is it even worth it anymore? It's not worth it. It's just better for me to just let the citizens of the country not pay tax. Because if I have to go through that process and I'm not making enough money to even spend on the economy, then what's the positivity behind that? So taxes should be efficient. And that one is certainty. Taxes should be certain. People should know exactly how much they are paying as tax. So taxes should be very clear. I told you about my experience with Domino's Pizza. The value of my tax the amount of the tax VAT was specified. So there's no confusion about it. You're paying this amount of tax, this percentage as tax. And the last one is neutrality. Taxes should be used with caution, in terms of it should not be used to affect the economy negatively. Of course, it should be used for positive reasons, but taxes should be taken away from politics of the economy, because of course economics has to do with political economy. So taxes should be used neutrally, not to be used in some aspects of the economy. Now, who came up with all these principles? His name is Adam Smith. This man, very popular in economics. He came up with the idea of all these canons of taxation. We call them canons, like the gun, the bomb kind of thing. So, but there are still more canons, there are still more principles of taxation. We still have more ideas that have been contributed to the principles of a good tax system. Okay, so let's talk about the methods of tax. Methods of tax. Now, we have three major methods. We're going to talk about them one by one. The first one we're going to talk about is progressive tax, which means the more you earn, the more tax you pay. That sounds logical, sounds like common sense. If you make more money, you pay more tax. If you buy more goods, you should pay more tax. That's very simple. So progressive tax is talking about as your tax base is increasing, as your money is increasing, your income or the value of your property is increasing, so also the tax you pay on that property should also increase. That's for progressive tax. Everything going the same direction. Please understand that even if it is like that, it's the same way backwards. Progressive tax is also saying as your value is also reducing, your tax rate should also what? Reduce. So it's not always about going up. It also means that going down in the same direction or going up in the same direction. Tax base going up, tax rate going up. Tax base going down, tax rate going down. Just like that. The next one is what we call proportional tax. That's like a tax that is the same across all kinds of incomes, across all kinds of tax base. So let's put it this way. In a society, we have like 3 homes. One home is worth 50 million, another home is worth 100 million, and a third home is worth, let's say, 1 billion. Now, imagine there's property tax, and the one worth 100 million is paying 10%. The one worth 50 million is paying 10%. The one worth 1 billion is paying 10%. We call that what? Proportional tax. The same proportion across different incomes or different tax bases. So that simply means that the tax is quite the same in terms of its tax rate. 10% for everybody. Let's say in Nigeria, the president makes money as a salary, and the president pays 5% of that as income tax. Teachers make money as well. Regardless of how much teachers make, they pay 5% of that as income tax. Maybe let's say a plumber, a doctor, everybody's paying 5% of their income as income tax. That's what we call proportional, the same proportion, same tax rate. Now we have regressive. Regressive is like the opposite of progressive, which means when your income is increasing, your tax rate is what? Decreasing, going down. Let's reverse it. When your income is also decreasing, what's happening to your tax rate is also what? Increasing. You might ask me, is that not confusing? Yes, it's kind of confusing, but that happens with specific type of tax. Example of them is poll tax. Poll tax is like, let's say tax per head. Or let me just give an example of something. Let's say you're traveling to another city and you get to the border and they tell you before you can drive your car into the next city, you have to pay maybe let's say like 1,000 naira tax. So like it's like a money charged on you for leaving your country, driving to another country, or leaving your city, driving to another city at the toll gate. So you get there and you give the person 1,000 and you're driving. Now the first person who drove a Toyota Corolla, and the person makes about 50,000 per month. Yeah, the person pays 1,000 naira. How much is that 1,000 naira to the person? Compared to the person, the next driver, the person who is driving a Lexus Jeep. And the person also pays the same 1,000. The person makes about 10 million every month. Okay, good. Compare the value of what it is to the first person and the second person. Well, here comes the third person. He's driving a Bugatti, if you can find one in Nigeria anyway. So he's driving a Bugatti and he's having about let's say it's worth about 100 million. The person has about like 500 million in his account that very month. What does that mean? So how much is 1,000 to the first person, to the second person, to the third person? What is the rate? The rate to each of them is different. So it's like a regressive tax. The more money you have, the less important the tax is to you, or the less consequence of the tax is, or the burden of the tax to you, or the less the value of the tax to you. Because you're making more money, the tax seems cheaper. And if you're making less money, the tax seems more expensive. Oh, think about the man who's going to even drive his motorcycle. And the man makes about just 10,000 or 20,000 naira. The person still have to pay 1,000 naira. Now compare 1,000 out of your 20,000, compare 1,000 out of your 1 million, compare 1,000 out of your 100 million. They're quite different. That tells us what regressive tax is. So in a simple way for you to understand, regressive tax kind of indicates that the poor pays more, while the rich pays less. Progressive tax also kind of indicates that, or implies that, the rich pays more because it's progressive and the poor pays less. I hope you're not trying to be poor because you're going to pay less tax. Okay, good. But now, proportional tax is saying that everybody pays about the same amount, regardless of their income or tax base. Now that we understand that already, let's talk about tax base. Tax base is talking about the value that you must pay tax on. Let's say your house or your property or your income. So you can pay tax on your property, you can pay tax on your income, you can pay tax on a product. That's your tax base. Why are we taxing you? Why are you paying tax on this? That becomes your tax base. Not that thing per se, but the value of that thing. Example, if I'm paying tax on these glasses, that is, let's say these glasses are worth, let's say 2,000. So my tax base is what? 2,000. My tax rate can be 10%, can be 2%, doesn't really matter. Let's talk about tax payment. Tax payment is talking about the exact amount you paid as tax. And we can see example of that here, where it says that King earns $450,000 yearly as a comedian. How much would he pay as tax if the rate is 20%? So if the rate is 20%, it simply means King, we have to say 20 over 100 times $45,000. So that tells us our tax payment, the exact money that King has to pay for this. So tax payment is the exact money you pay as tax, regardless of your tax base, but it's depending on your tax rates. Now, this example says King earns $450,000 yearly as a comedian. How much would he pay as tax if the rate is 20%? So if the rate is 20%, it simply means 20% times $450,000 will give us our tax payment. So by calculation, that simply means King is paying $90,000 every year as tax. That's $90,000 will now be 20% of his $450,000. Very good. Let's talk about tax rate. Tax rate is talking about the percentage of the tax paid to be paid as tax. That's the percent. It must have a percent, like maybe 40%, 12%, 15% to be paid as tax. Now let's look at this right now. Mika bought a PS5 Q-Lite worth $300,000 and paid $42,000 as tax. What is the tax rate on this product? That simply means you're going to say $42,000 divided by $300,000 times 100. And that means Mika is paying 14% as tax rate. So 42,000 is about 40% of his 300,000. You have to do more examples of this to understand it better. Let's talk about this quickly, types of tax. Now we have income tax, we have value-added tax, we have corporate tax, custom tax, excise duty or excise tax, we have property tax. Property tax is a tax paid on properties, land. Excise tax is a tax paid on products that are actually demerit goods or luxury goods. Then we have custom duty or custom tax is a tax paid on products that are imported into a country or exported out of a country. So we have import duties, we have export duties. While we have corporate tax. Corporate tax is the type of tax we pay on profit. So when a business makes money, the business pays tax. If Prep Station makes about 250 million in a year, they pay a percentage of that as tax. That's what we call corporate tax. Then we have value-added tax. Every time you buy a property, not like a property, every time you buy a product or you pay for a service, you might pay VAT. I told you about buying Domino's pizza, right? And I paid VAT on it. So you have to pay tax on the product you buy as long as you're getting value from it, either from production level or from distribution level. Then income tax, which is very common. Income tax is talking about the money we earn. How much tax do we pay on that? So every salary we earn, we pay tax on that salary. And if you divide this into two, this brings us into direct tax and indirect tax. So direct tax are the income, the corporate property tax. Indirect tax are VAT, custom, and excise tax. So we still have more types of tax like sales tax, very similar to VAT. Now let's go about the advantages of direct tax and income tax. Can you spot the advantage of direct tax here? And can you spot the disadvantage of direct tax here? Well, I'm just going to check if you can spot them out now. So let us see. For direct tax, reduces disposable income. That is a disadvantage. So this is a disadvantage. There's an X. Now it reduces income inequality. That's an advantage because some people earn more than others. We have to reduce that gap. Increases tax evasion. Yes, that is a disadvantage because people are trying to evade tax. They don't want to pay their taxes. Reduces investment and savings. Direct tax does that, but that's also a bad one. That's a negative one. It also reduces incentive to work. Yes, people don't want to work more because they feel that the tax is too much, but it also increases government revenue, and that's a positive one. That means it is good. Okay, good. Now that we know what that is, let's talk about indirect tax now. What are the advantages of indirect tax and disadvantages of indirect tax? So let's take them one by one. Now, the first one says increases price level. If it increases price level, that's a disadvantage, so that's not good. And if it encourages smuggling, because some people don't want to pay for import duties or export duties, that is a disadvantage. Now, it also could be less certain or predictable. That's also a disadvantage because we want tax to be certain. Don't forget about the principles of tax. Now, it's more efficient and flexible. Yes, government can manipulate it easily, and it's quite efficient because you can escape it, actually. It actually reduces demerit goods and services. Yes, there are demerit goods. Demerit goods are goods that are not so good. Example, tobacco is a good, but it's a demerit good. Cocaine is a good, but it's a demerit good. A firearm, a gun is a good, but it's a demerit good. There are also some things that are not so good, but are demerit goods, actually. So that is one. Increases income inequality. Yes, because it's kind of regressive in nature. That means that it's a negative one. So we now know all the positive and negative ones that we have there. Now let's test your knowledge of this. So look at your screen right now and tell me, this is Alan, he plays for Man City. What kind of tax do you think Alan pays? He pays income tax. That is the answer. Okay, good. This is a burger. It's yummy, sweet burger. So what kind of tax do you think you pay on the burger if you buy one from a local store? That's certainly going to be value-added tax. Okay, and this is Jack Daniels, this liquor. And what kind of tax do you think you pay on alcohol, actually? Well, I know what you're thinking. Of course, excise tax. And this is iPhone. What kind of tax do you think you pay on your iPhone? Of course, it should be value-added tax, yes, at some point, and it could also be custom duties because iPhones are imported into Nigeria. So that is also under one. And here we have Versace as a logo, let's say representing the brand, the company itself. What kind of tax would this company pay? Of course, that would be corporate tax because they make profits from selling wares to people. So therefore, that's what we call property tax. That's what we call corporate tax. And the last one is a building. Yes, what kind of tax will you pay if you own this type of building? And the answer definitely is what we call what? Property tax. If you own a building, you pay property tax. Now, this explains the concept of direct and indirect tax. So I'm going to leave you with one thing. Incidence of tax. Now, incidence of tax is talking about the burden of tax, the actual payment of tax. In many cases, the burden of tax are shifted or is shifted to people. Now, when the burden of tax cannot be shifted to another person, we call that direct tax. If you own a property and government asks you to pay tax on that property, you are the one to pay for it. Nobody else will pay for it on your behalf. That makes it what? Direct tax. That makes the burden of tax on you. Now, if you earn an income, a salary, maybe you work for Prep Station and Prep Station pays you like 1 million every month, that simply means that you have to pay tax on that 1 million. Pay P-A-Y-E, pay as you earn. Now, your salary at that point is 1 million, so you pay tax on maybe let's say 10%. You can't shift that burden to somebody else. It has to be you paying for that tax, and that's what we call direct tax, income tax. The same way, Prep Station makes profit and maybe declares their profits and pay tax on that profit, maybe let's say 2% or 5%. That is corporate tax. They cannot shift it to people. They cannot shift it to somebody else to pay. But let's take a look at excise tax. Now, excise tax are tax on products that are demerit goods. That they actually have some kind of negative consequences when people use them. Example is alcohol. The government doesn't want people drinking so much of it because it actually has some external effects. So now, if there's a tax on alcohol, do you think the alcohol company will pay for it? Yes, they will pay for it initially, but then they transfer that tax to you. The same with value-added tax. If you buy something like pizza and you pay tax on pizza, the tax is transferred to you, like it was transferred to me when I was buying Domino's pizza. I bought the pizza and paid tax on the pizza itself. Now, also custom duties. If you import a product into a country and you export a product out of a country, that means you have to pay tax on it. When the company that is importing the product pay the tax, they pay it initially, but they transfer that tax into the price of that product, then you have to pay as a consumer at the end of the day. So this has brought us to the end of this session. I hope you don't forget, direct tax and indirect tax are two types of tax. Direct tax has to do with the burden of tax cannot be shifted, and indirect tax means the burden of tax can be shifted to the consumer or the final buyer of the product. Thank you very much. See you in the next session.